record and we're ready to go. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this really special evening with Karen Rose and Christine Feehan, two of our very favorite romance writers. My name is Nina Jane. I am the Cary Memorial Library programming librarian, and I'm very pleased to be here. I have a few things to say, and then we'll get started. A few people to thank, like Porter Square Books, where you can still order Karen's new book, Say No More, which is coming out today. Oh, here she goes. And you can pre-order Christine's Dark Song, the 37th in the Carpathian series, from Porter Square Books today, up until the end of the evening. I'd like to thank Penguin Random House and Berkeley Penguin Random House for helping us bring this program to the Cary Library. This is being recorded by Lex Media, our local cable station, and we will have it up on our YouTube channel ASAP. I wanted to let you know that we do have a romance book club at the Cary Library. It's small but mighty, so you should join us. If you're not local, you can join us virtually for the next few months. If you are local, join us physically when we're back in the building. And we would always like to thank our Library Foundation because they're the ones that help support all of our programs. So thank you for that. So you can ask questions in the Q&A. We are live streaming this on Facebook. You can also ask questions there, and they will come into the Q&A from somebody who's watching this whole thing. And you can use the chat for comments and for tech issues. So without further ado, I'm going to do some introductions. This is my favorite part. So Karen Rose started out as an engineer for a large consumer goods company, earning 2 patents. But as Karen says, scenes were roiling in my head and I couldn't concentrate on my job, so I started writing them down. I started out writing for fun and soon found that I was hooked. Her debut suspense novel, Don't Tell, was released in July 2003. Since then, she has published more than 15 novels and 2 novellas. Her 24th novel, Say No More, which is coming out today, has been released today. Her books have appeared on the bestseller lists of New York Times, USA Today, London Sunday Times, Germany's Der Spiegel, and the Irish Times. Obviously, people love her. What I found interesting on her website were some fun facts, like she spent her 17th birthday in a Guatemalan prison, and that she once ate a live fish in Japan to not be rude. So you can go to her website and learn much more. Christine Feehan is a number one New York Times bestselling author with 83 published books in 7 different series: the Dark series, Ghostwalkers, Leopard, Drake series, Sea Haven, Shadow, and Torpedo Inc. All 7 of her series have hit ¡1 spots on New York Times bestseller list. Judgment Road, the first book in her newest series, debuted #1 at the New York Times bestseller list. I thought this was a really funny quote on her website from Time magazine. After Bram Stoker and Anne Rice and Joss Whedon, who created the venerated Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Christine Feehan is the person most credited with popularizing the neck gripper.
Neck
Yes,
gripper.
that's right. I've never heard neck gripper before, so there's a new one for me too. Okay, so I have a question for you, and it is really about your research into your books. Of course, you'll talk about your new books, but the research that goes into your books must have you wondering, I hope nobody looks at my browser history. And so can you talk a little bit about the things that you look up, the kind of stuff that you've researched, and maybe some of the funny stories along the way?
Christine, you want to go first?
Oh, dear. Well, yes, I do research very heavily every single series that I write. And I have to research everything from if I'm inventing a new weapon for the Navy, and it has to sound something that actually could be used. And so I then have to check with primary sources, does this sound real? And eventually it sounds too real, and then I kind of get in trouble. And that's not good, let me tell you. I kind of get in trouble big time. So I've had that happen. it's not fun. It's a little scary. So then I have to research where the terrorist cells are in the Congo. I have to know where they are when I'm writing a book. And that's always an interesting thing. And because you really want to know when you're putting your guys in trouble somewhere. And then there's the whole sex thing, where you're trying to figure out something that you've never heard of in your life. And you really don't want someone checking your history browser then. That's really incredible. So yeah, I've had a lot of fun.
Um, I tend to rely a lot on primary sources, but for, as I'm going through the book, something will come up, and I'll have to Google, how do you make this kind of a bomb, or how big of a suitcase, how small of a suitcase can you fit a body into, and you'd be surprised at the rabbit holes that you end up going down. The one with the body in the suitcase, I found this guy who was about 6 feet tall, but could fold himself into a duffel bag, and it's on YouTube. And I was like, okay, so I could definitely put in a petite woman. So I was okay with that. But, and she was still alive. I don't think she died in that book. But, and then of course, then you go into down the rabbit hole of the cats in boxes and cats in bags, and if I fits, I sits. And I spent a lot of time on that one. I was like, oh no, I'm supposed to be researching bodies. I have a really good friend two really good friends. I was matron of honor in their wedding, and he is an emergency room doctor. So he helps me with a lot of my questions. And, for a long time, I was worried I was just taking up his time. But he seems to really enjoy it. And the first time I called him, I needed a poison. I needed a drug that could incapacitate a person in 10 seconds or less, and was inhaled. And so I called him and I said, I know you're busy saving lives because you're an actual doctor and I'm just writing a book, and he's like, oh, I can help you with this. And like an hour later, he was still giving me. I was like, okay, so this is like a treasure trove I didn't even know I had. So I do tend to rely also a lot on primary sources. I want it to be believable, not too believable, because there was an arson book where I put together like a little cocktail concoction that the villain used, and I have a background in chemistry, so I knew what it was going to be. So I changed it a little bit. And in the preface, I actually put in a letter saying, please do not try this at home. But so yeah, I'm often surprised I haven't gotten in trouble. So it would, I don't think it would be pleasant to be in trouble, but it would certainly be a good story to tell later, in events like these.
So, what was that funny story that that Erin was mentioning earlier?
Oh, yeah. We have to be careful when and where we talk about our books, and who's listening, because sometimes you forget. So this was back in, I had written a book called You Belong to Me, and it's the first in my Baltimore series. And the killer, his MO was he would shoot people in the head, and he would want to make sure they were dead because he wasn't stupid. And so he needed a car, so he was lying in wait for this woman in a all-night grocery store parking lot, and he kills her, and he takes her car, and he throws her under the van he'd been driving, and he leaves her there to die. And he thinks he's killed her. He leaves her there dead. And my editor in the margin says, this is an example of gratuitous violence. She needs to live. And I'm like, how do I make her live? It took me 2 days and a call to my emergency room doctor. I finally found a way to make her live so that she didn't just get hit on the head, because that was not consistent with his behavior. You need to keep the villain's behavior consistent, or else he's not believable. And so I fixed it. My editor was happy. The book goes out. And then it's the day that the New York Times list came out. And normally I would wait by the phone, and as soon as it was a ring, I'd pick it up. But that day I'm like, screw this, I'm going to Disney World. And we only live about 2 hours from Disney World. So I took the family. We were on the shuttle from the Magic Kingdom to what used to be called Downtown Disney, where all the restaurants are. Get a call from my editor. She says, it's number 7, yay! And we were like, yay! And she said, and oh, by the way, I read your proposal for the next book. I'm so glad that Dolores didn't get killed. And I said, well, that's on you. I said, I would have left her dead under that van if it had been me. And everybody gasped. I'd forgotten I was on a shuttle at Disney with children. And my daughter was like, no, it's not real. It's a book. It's a book. She didn't really kill somebody. You put them under a van. So I have learned to be very careful when and where, but it doesn't really stop us, Christine. I mean, we plot murder.
We plot murder. We tend to do it in restaurants and bars. We sit together with other friends who sit around with us, and we plot all kinds of murder, and we get really excited about it. The perfect murder. We're always trying to come up with the perfect murder and how to get away with it. And we get so excited, we forget that there are people around us, and all of a sudden we start noticing that there's quiet, and that some people are kind of moving away from us or staring at us like,
Back away from the crazy ladies.
Who are those people over there? We thought they looked like nice ladies. Apparently we're not.
Nice ladies. We can be nice ladies and plot murder. We just don't do it.
Just on the page, which is very successful, by the way. So Liz, who Karen, I think I told you about, she changed her anniversary plans to be here tonight. She says, and I think this is a question both of you could answer, is many times while reading your books, I start getting sad that they seem to be wrapping up, but then they keep going. And I love that you stretch out the endings without making them feel dragged out. And I feel like this is the same for Christine. Like, I still read the Carpathians, and you're up to number 37. How do you know when to stop? And can you confirm that you'll never end any of your series?
Can I confirm, what was that last one?
That you'll never end your series.
Okay. Well, I am not gifted as some people are to know how to write a book in this many pages, because I don't hear it that way in my head. I just write until it's done. And then I'm always cutting. So I think I cut probably almost 20,000 words out of my last book because it was just so long. And it said, and I would love to be able to write it to a certain length, but I know when it's done. And I always feel like that last little part, the kind of the wrap up part, is helpful. It's helpful for me, and it's helpful to give me closure for the characters I'm about to leave behind. I think it's also helpful for readers to kind of say, yeah, this was all of the mayhem and the all the horrible things that have happened up until this time, but now it's so calm, everything's happy. The people who survived are happy. We're gonna kind of wrap a bow around it, and I do like that. As for finishing a series, I set my series in cities, and so the next city will have a few people from other books there, but it'll also be a whole new group of people. So the characters go on. The series might pick up and drop into another place, but the characters go on. Oh, and happy anniversary.
Thank you. Christine, would you like to answer the same question?
Well, the thing with the Carpathian series is that I always knew that there were thousands and thousands of romance books, and there was only me writing the Carpathian books. And so if there was, say 100 couples, that was going to be all right. And there's only, at this point, if there's 37, then there's only 37 couples in that world. And I knew that was going to be okay. The actual storylines are all different, and where they're set, it's all different. And the terrible things that happen or the fun things that happen, those are all different. And those are the things that the backgrounds and that I hope really surprise people the way they do me. They take me on these great adventures, and each couple, that's why I don't go back to the same couple all the time. I love to have a new couple, and I love the way they interact and how beautiful they are, and getting to know them. And so setting them in a different background with a different, something that's going on is the way I keep it fresh.
Mm-hmm.
And
Thank you.
that keeps it fresh, and it also allows the reader to kind of still feel like they know where they exist in your universe, because they can go back and say, oh, this person appeared, this wasn't like in my first book, or this person appears, and that's one of the things I love about your books too, is that the characters will occasionally pop up, but you have so many of them now, so it's not like you have to always go back to the same people. They're always popping up as new people.
Thank you, Karen.
Well, that's what I actually love about your books is that when you do go back and pull in characters from previous books, it always makes sense. They're not just walk-on roles. You know, there's a reason that they're there.
That's
And
important to me. Absolutely important to me. And I feel it's the same with Karen. If they're in that city, there's a reason they appear. They're not just gratuitously there. And I don't like that if I'm reading a book and all of a sudden all these characters come from nowhere to be in that book and I don't know who they are.
Yeah.
I want them to be there for a reason. And so when I write a book, they have to make sense. And when I read Karen's books, I know that they're going to make sense. There's a reason those characters are in that book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. Karen, did you want to speak to that?
Having a reason is important for all of the characters too. I mean, the main characters. I know I have struggled in a couple ways, a couple books I've struggled in how to bring the two main characters together, what makes sense. And the fact that they live in the same city doesn't mean that they're going to be in the right place at the right time and they're going to get involved in this mystery or, you know, this thriller situation or whatever. There has to be a good reason for them to be in that same place at that, you know, at that right time. And having a reason for all of your characters to be there, that's important to me too. And I spend a lot of time with that.
Right. Okay, cool. Zoe from Facebook would like to know, how do you feel when you finish writing a book? Is it relief to get the whole story out, sadness, oh, it's over, or a blend of both?
Relief and exhaustion. I don't think the sadness hits me until I'm done with revisions, because then I know that they're done and they're gone. And, you know, I might see them in the editing process, but the ability to shape them is done by then. They're fully formed as to who they're going to be.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, for me, it really depends upon the book. I love writing that first version of the book when I run it through, because it's such an adventure for me. And then when I do the second edits, the final version, I'm good with that. Then if I have to see it again, I pretty much want to rip it to shreds. And oh my God, if I have to see it after that, I could burn it.
Mm-hmm. And when let the serial killer have them all, just
yes.
take them all.
Yes. Because my mind has already turned to another book. Like, I have books lined up in my head. I'm not kidding. They are lined up and it's like they're pushing to come out. And so I have like 2 good runs on a book and I'm thrilled with them. I can manage a 3rd one. That 4th one, no. I've already got that need to write. And like when I finish a book, I'm already writing the next one, like literally the next day. I'm sitting down writing the first chapter of that next book. And so you make me stop and do more edits, not happy here.
Well, that's why you're so prolific, right? You just move on to the next thing, next book. Dawn has an interesting question, because some of this was mentioned on your websites. Did you ever get into a standoff with a character who had a different idea of what their story should be?
You want to tackle that one first, Christine? Because I know I have.
Oh, heck yeah. It happens. It happens all the time. You know, there's no way I could. I mean, I'm in awe of Karen because she writes a book that you have to plot out certain elements. You have to. When you're doing a book like she does, there is no way you can just sit down and go, oh, I'll follow whatever this guy wants to do. Me, I can you know, I have this beautiful scene in mind. I might even have somebody in mind for the guy or the girl, and they go off in a completely different direction. I might throw a little tantrum, but I still have to go with them. And my beautiful scene never, you know, it never gets written. There's no way I can write scenes ahead of time because I know I'm never going to get there. My book is going to follow where my character wants to go. And I love it when people say, "Oh, I knew who the murderer was all along." And I go, "Really? Because I didn't." I really didn't, because I don't write like that. It's very organic. So I'm in awe of people who plot. I can't do that.
Well, I always know who the killer is. I don't always know how they're going to get there. I think I know, and then the characters do all the things that they do, and they go here, they go there, and I end up having to replot. Like about 2/3 of the way through, I usually say, "Oh no, I'm so far off my outline. How do I get back?" Because I still have to make the bad guy get caught in the way that I had hoped he would get caught, you know, when I first started out. Often it doesn't end up that way at all. And people who I thought were going to play like a huge role in in bringing the character down, but give their lives in the process, I come to get too fond of them and I can't kill them. Other people I kill, and my editors say you can't kill them, and I have to come back and bring them, not as a vampire way, but I have to bring them back to life. But I've had a couple characters that just walked on the screen and they were either not planned at all, or they were planned in a very different way. And the one that everybody seems to like is Deacon Novak, because I was writing a book in my Baltimore series, and the main character is Joseph. He's in an alley. He's standing over a body that's covered in boxes. The only thing visible is this guy's feet in red socks. And I kept thinking, Wicked Witch of the West. And all of a sudden, he looks around, and the guy who works for him, who he doesn't really like very much at this point, they do grow to become friends later. But he's standing there, and he's got this white hair and these oddly colored eyes. And he's wearing this leather coat that kind of flaps in the wind. And I swear I heard the music from the Clint Eastwood movies in my head. And I was like, that had never happened before. It hasn't happened since. And I thought, oh, this is going to be fun. And he kept trying to become the main character. Every time I would write a scene, this guy was like, he was there and he was aggressive. And I'm like, finally, my husband always does a mental health check with me when I say stuff like this, but you know, we talk to our characters in our heads. And I was like, dude, you know, if you back off, I'll give you your own book someday, but you can't have this one. And if you keep on trying to take over, I'm going to replace you with somebody else. Like, you know, and he did back off. I was able to finish the book. And then when I wrote his book a couple books later, I realized why he had been so vivid in my imagination, because he and his family have the same genetic syndrome that's in my family. But when he walked on the screen, I didn't know that. I didn't know it when he appeared in the next book. I didn't know it until I sat down to write his book. So to me, that's the fun part. That's the organic part. And having these characters and understanding who they are, they're going to make decisions along the way that drives the plot in a believable way. And that's when they go here and they go there and they go everywhere, but where you want them to go. So.
And it is true that a secondary character will suddenly step in and try to completely take over your book. It happens all the time.
Yeah. And it's happened since then, but never with the vividness of this character. He's like the standalone in my head. But yeah, that's happened. Characters walk on, and they're just supposed to be like, you know, a walk on, walk off character, and then they end up being a huge part of the book. And they're like, oh, I guess I better write their book, you know. So that happens all the time.
So about 100 people on Facebook probably just went, no, you can't cut Deacon.
No, I did it, I promise.
Okay. This question from Adaya is for Christine. Will any of the monastery monks follow Aiden to New York?
You have asked that question several times, and I actually don't have an answer for you because I don't know. That is something that I honestly, truly do not know.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. So this one's for Karen from Gabby. How do you choose where to set your series? Is it based on research? Actually, you know, Christine, you could answer that question too, because you have series all over the place and all through time.
Well, when I first started, I didn't plan to write the way I'm doing now. I mean, who knows when you're first starting out that you're going to have all these books, and it just kind of happened. But when I first started, it was important to me to have a large city where somebody could get lost if they wanted to be lost, and kind of disappear from sight, because that was a story about an abused wife on the run and hiding. I also wanted a city with a large enough law enforcement group that you could have two cops work in that city for their entire careers and never have met each other until that book. And so you kind of have that newness and recognition of a new character there. And so I didn't want to write about Cincinnati because I was living there, and we visited Chicago a lot. So I picked Chicago. And so Chicago, we had family there. That was my first series. And then after that, it depended on who I was talking to. I had a friend who was a teacher with me when I was a school teacher, and she was from South Philly, in northern Jersey, South Philly. And so I set a book there, and that was the Chickatellis. But the whole Atlanta part of it, that just came because Daniel Vartanian walked on my screen and became important. He wasn't supposed to be important. After that, it was Baltimore, because that's where I grew up, in the Baltimore area. Cincinnati, I lived there. Minneapolis, this was one where a friend promised, if I set the book in Minneapolis, and she might be watching, so you can't deny this because this is true. She said, if you write a book in Minneapolis, you can come to Minneapolis for the signing. And I said, it's going to be in February. It's going to be cold. Nobody's going to come out for a signing. Oh, we're hardy in Minneapolis. We'll come out. So the night of the signing, there was a snowstorm and everybody stayed home. And I was like, and we were almost trapped in this bookshop, which is not a bad place to be trapped. But all the woman had was DVDs of House. And so we just sat there and watched. We binged on House until it was safe to drive again. And then the California series is because I do spend about a little less than half my years now in California. So but again, I'm still looking for that same thing, that city that is, could be like it could be a place where anybody could live, a big enough city for somebody to get lost in if they really wanted to.
Yeah, that works. I set mine wherever I love. I do a lot of research on different cities, and I obviously like I love New Orleans and New York, and I just I go around to different places, Chicago, and fall in love with them, and just decide I got to write about this place, and that's what I do. So I end up writing about some place that I have fallen in love with, and do as much research as I can. And I don't travel as much as I used to, but I hope to. I hope to get to a place that I want to set a book in. So that's how I do it.
Yeah. The travel part is the hard part, because that people are like, oh, I'm just going to go flit over here for a week. But it's really, it takes a lot more out of you, because if you really do the research right, it's a business trip. It's not like you're there. I mean, you're there for fun, because it is fun, but you're there to do a job. And so it can, by the time you get back, then you're like tired and you need to take a nap. And so you've lost writing time. But through the beauty of YouTube, we can go places that we might never even be able to go.
Right. And if it's out of the country now, and it's places like Romania and the ice caves and things like that, I'm fortunate in that I do have a very intrepid daughter who will do those things for me that I cannot no longer do, and she's very good at them, and she does them.
I wonder if she would do, maybe if she would travel for some of the places I want to see.
She probably would.
Ask her.
She has gone down the Amazon River, and she's gone all over the place, and she records, does videos, and she takes pictures, and she journals, and she's gone all over the world for me.
Isn't she on a hike across some mountains right now?
She is. Yes, she is.
So we'll expect some pictures from that.
Yeah.
So, Christine, you said that you don't keep like a spreadsheet or anything. It's more organic. But V says, both of you, how do you keep up with all of the characters in your different series? Do you use family trees or something to manage relationships?
Well, I definitely have copious notes. I have for each series, I have a major, you know, I don't want to say Bible because everybody calls it that and it drives me nuts, but I definitely have, pictures and descriptions and even the houses where they live and the towns and the small little businesses in the towns and everything about them.
That would make sense.
I keep a spreadsheet, and I keep a spreadsheet of like a database spreadsheet of all the characters and what I know about what I know about them when they pop up in the stories. So I can go back and say, what color did I say their eyes were? How tall are they? But I also keep maps, Google Earth. When I find out, I went to Cincinnati because I was looking for a house that Scarlett Bishop could live in, because I knew she lived at the top. Cincinnati's got all these big hills and she lives at the top of a hill. And so I rented a car, I drove there and I rented a car and I drove around until I found it. And then I took pictures, but you don't want to sit outside somebody's house and take lots of pictures because then they worry that you're like a stalker or something horrible. But I went back to Google Earth and you just save it and you go back to those pictures. It's like, okay, this is what it looked like. So I do keep that. My daughter keeps the spreadsheet for me now, and she basically now tells me when I have used a name too many times, when I've forgotten a key detail about somebody. I like to name receptionist Stacy, and so in 3 separate books I have had receptionists named Stacy, and they're not related. Have nothing to, they just, apparently Stacy is a name that sticks to my head. And so now I'm not allowed to use the name Stacy anymore. So now when I'm writing a book, because she's my first editor also, I'll make sure that there's a receptionist named Stacy in every book. Now, by the time you get it, the name is changed to something else, but I make sure that just to keep her busy. I can't let them fall down on the job here.
That's funny.
It is. So Jennifer from Facebook wants to know, Christine, how do you pick the unique names for the Carpathians? But I want to add to that because, Karen, I think you also pick very interesting and unique names for your characters that really have, sort of personify their background, maybe. So I was, how do you come up with your unique names?
Oh, names. Okay. I thought you were
Names.
saying memes.
No, that's my next question. So how do you both come up with your unique names?
Well, I definitely, once I know the character in my head, that person has to have the right name. If I don't have the right name, then she or he doesn't speak to me. So I have to go hunt for that name, and it has to resonate with me. And I go through a lot of names. I hunt through them in books that I have, and then also on the internet in different countries. I have to know what they mean. And it's quite a process because that name has to fit the character that's in my head. It also has to look a certain way to me on when I spell it out. That's the weird part too. It has to look a certain way. It can't. I can't even explain it. That's a big part of it. Is how it looks to me when it's written.
I pick the names. I think I pick the names a lot. Sometimes they're people I've known, and I just like the name. Sometimes I used to pick last names from when we would go to Disney World. If you've ever been there, all the strollers are all lined up outside the rides, and they'll say, today, this is the property of the Smith family or the Jones family. And I would take my little pad and I'd write them down. There were all these wonderful new names I'd never seen. And so they might pop up in a book. But it's interesting when you talk about names, knowing what names mean around the world, because that's really important, especially if your books are distributed around the world, which we're both lucky enough that that's true. And there's one villain in one of my books, and his last name is Robinette. And there's no spoiler there, because he's the villain from the very beginning. And I got an email from my editor in France, and this only happened this one time. She said, "We would like to be able to respectfully change the name of your villain, because in French this means little male appendage, means little penis." And she said, "I just don't think readers will take him seriously with that name." I'm like, "Yeah, we should probably change it." I think we changed it to like Robertson or something like that. That didn't mean something wrong in another country. But I had met, for one other character, I had met a woman in South Africa, and she was so happy. She wanted to be a villain in the book, and she wanted to be killed off in a book, because one of her friends had been killed off in one of my books, and so she wanted to be killed off too. But when I researched her name, it actually meant turquoise in one of the Persian languages. And I thought, well, that's just beautiful. And it fit right into a part of the plot where I needed to have like her name was turquoise. Her mother was, I think, jade. Her mother was amethyst, and her aunt was jade. And so it kind of went along with that. I was like, well, that's cool. And so she was much happier that she got to be a pretty major character. It was a child who had been living in the basement since the time she was born. And she got to be a pretty major character in the book. But knowing what they mean in other places around the world is really important.
Yeah.
That sounds like a tremendous amount of research too, and some serendipity.
Yes, a lot of serendipity.
Judy would like to know, well, she says authors sometimes find inspiration from interesting places or events. Do you have an inspiration story you can share?
Well, the cult in Eden is based on a personal story, just very loosely based. But when I was in college, I was part of a church where the minister was found to be a fraud. We found out that after 10 years of being the pastor of this church, he'd been embezzling, he'd been lying, he lied about his references, he'd never graduated from Harvard like he claimed, and it just, the list went on and on and on. But the thing that really, first of all, that it really erodes a person's trust, because you put trust in your spiritual leader, your pastor. And after that, I was very cynical. But what impacted me more was the reactions of the people around me, because my husband was instrumental in exposing this guy's fraudulent background. And you would have thought that the people in the church would have been, well, thank you. You've saved us possibly from, having more money stolen, having some other bad things happen. But that's not what happened. The part of the church was like, he's got to go because he's a criminal. But another part of the church was like, well, he's still a good man. He said he was sorry. He should be able to stay. And the other part of the church said, y'all are crazy, and they left. But the two factions that stayed really became a very hostile, contentious situation where you had families against families, and people who've been friends for decades turning on each other. My husband and his brother got death threats. So the whole idea of someone following a person and not being willing to, and I'm still in the boat where he should have gone. I said, after all these decades, I still don't see how so many of the people that we had known for so long could say, it's worth it to me to have him stay. It's worth you being hurt for him to stay. And so those emotions I kind of put in the book with the cult, because it's a situation where you have the kind of this blind devotion and this blind following of someone who hasn't earned it. And so that's Insane No More.
Christine, I think whatever. So I'm just going to ask a couple more questions and then we can talk about your new books. Denise says, how do you decide which character will be next in a series, or do you decide? Is it up to the characters?
For me, it's always who's talking loudest. And so I know quite often that's a huge disappointment to my readers. I get, when I say hundreds of letters, I am not kidding, demanding a certain character that they want to read. And some people get really upset. I will never read you again if you do not write this certain character. And I can't. If that character's not talking to me, there's just no way, not to mention I'm not very good at being told what to do. I never have been. Asked my father. He will tell you I was a horrible child. I never was very good at listening to authority figures. But yeah, whoever talks to me the loudest, and sometimes I'll have somebody that I think is talking to me, and then suddenly they just fade away. So yeah, whoever is pushing forward really hard, that's who gets their book.
Sometimes I plan, but a lot of times it is that who's talking the loudest. And you know, I've had, not Say No More, but my next book, the hero is a character who's been with me since the beginning. He was the son of the heroine in my very first book. And for a long time, I would get letters, when is Tom getting his book? When Tom's 14, you know, you got to let Tom grow up. And I do keep that spreadsheet, and I know how old people are in book years. So it, you know, it doesn't follow along with current years, but I have to let them be old enough to be able to assume the mantle of responsibility. And they have to be ready. I have to be ready. And sometimes I'm planning a series and another character pops up that is talking louder, so they get the next book.
Yeah.
The squeaky wheel. Got it. Kristen wants to know, do either of you have an idea for a new series? Or is that a spoiler?
I always have ideas, you know. I'm a crazy person. Like, I'm one of those people that probably at some point in my life years ago would have been, you know, put in one of those homes. I have voices in my head all the time. Like, there's books in my head. They never stop. I have stories in my head all the time. So yeah, I have tons of new series in my head. It's just that I don't have enough hours in the day to write all the books that I want to write.
Yeah.
That's
So a little follow-up to that then is, how does a series rise to the top for you?
if a book just won't leave me alone and I have to write it. That's how Torpedo Ink. I mean, I always knew I was going to write it, but I was not necessarily going to publish it. It was really going to be something that I was writing for me in the evening. And that's how really that started. And sometimes I will do that, is I just can't not write a story. And so I'll write during the day, and then at night, I can't help myself. I'll write something else just because the story won't stop.
Thank you. Karen, how do you come up with, do you have any ideas for new parts of your series, new towns?
Yeah, actually I am. I'm putting together a new series, and I'm excited about it, but I don't know enough about it yet to talk about it, because then I end up cementing myself in directions I might not go later. But yes, I'll be able to talk about it soonish. I don't know when, but it's still up there kind of percolating.
So we should make sure to follow you on social media and get your newsletter.
Absolutely.
So we know.
Yes, of course.
Okay. So do you want to talk a little bit about your newest books, Say No More and Dark Song? I know Say No More is a second is it San Francisco series? Yeah, I read an arc and loved it. And Dark Song is 37 in the Carpathian series. Yeah, tell us about it. Tell us about writing them. Tell us about like everything.
Karen, you go first. This is your launch day.
Hooray. Well, Say No More is the second in the series, and this is Say You're Sorry, which is the first in this series. And Say You're Sorry, I set up the idea of the Eden cult. It's not the big bad in Say You're Sorry, but when Daisy is a heroine in this book, when she is almost kidnapped, she pulls a locket from the neck of her attacker, and that locket connects her to Gideon, because the design on that locket is also one he'd had tattooed on his chest as a 13-year-old boy, and the day before he was able to escape the cult. And so you learn more about the cult, a little bit about the cult in that book. You meet Gideon's sister Mercy towards the end of the book. Well, this one's Mercy's book, and Mercy she was abused badly in the cult, and so she has basically spent the last years of her life, from the time she escaped at 13, and she's 26 now, so 13 years she's been in therapy. She's been trying to get her life back, to put that past behind her. But Gideon has been trying to find Eden, and because he wants to rescue all the people who are still being held there against their wills, especially the children who are born there, who are taken there, and who can't escape. And Say No More is Mercy's coming to grips with her past, and she at first runs away. At the end of Say You're Sorry, she runs away. She runs back home. She lives in New Orleans, and she runs back home. And some other things happen in the beginning of the story that make her realize she has to go back. So in Mercy's first scene, she's back in Sacramento, back to face her demons. And so this is the story of her facing her main demon. It doesn't completely take down, a little spoiler, because obviously there's an arc and there's a third book, but there is definitely a satisfying ending for her big bad, and it sets the stage for the rest of it. So yes, so this is Mercy's series, and it's her coming to grips with her past. And she meets Rafe. Well, she had met Rafe in Say You're Sorry, but she and Rafe go on to work together. They have a very lovely romance, and then they fall in love at the end. So there's a happy ending.
It's really, really, really good.
It's what now?
It's really, really, really good.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
All right. So mine is called Dark Song. I do not have an actual book yet. It comes out September 1st, but it's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful cover.
Can you lift it up a little higher, because we only saw the bottom, the top part of it. Oh, that is pretty.
Isn't that pretty?
And who is the heroine of this one?
This is, the heroine is Elizabeta, and she was taken prisoner when she was 16 years old, and has been prisoner of a horrible vampire for like 1,000 years. So she, for centuries, she just has never been able to do anything for herself. She doesn't know how to take care of herself. She's been tormented for that long, and now they have rescued her, and they put her in the ground she's Carpathian. So they think, of course, that she will be able to care for herself, but she can't. She doesn't know how to do anything. And she's pretty terrified of coming out of the ground. And all of a sudden, she realizes, oh my God, I have a life mate, which means immediately he will claim her. And he is not just any old life mate. He happens to be an ancient who is this fierce warrior, one of the big bad, So when I realized that he was, and he had been this fierce warrior from one of this monastery that he had been, had put himself away because he was so dangerous, I thought, oh, great. What am I going to do? Here's this poor chick who doesn't know how to do anything, and she's with this horrible guy that is going to be awful. And I kind of forgot the whole life mate theory, because I'm a modern woman, that you have to be whatever your life mate needs. And this turned out to be the most beautiful love story. And I was so captivated by the two of them. And it was really set against this I was shocked at what was going on around them. All of the things between the Carpathians themselves, not just the vampire trying to get her back, but what was happening there in the compound and what they had to contend with. And in the end, they had to trust each other, these two virtual strangers. But it was really this beautiful love story, and is probably one of my most favorite of all the, if not my favorite of all the Carpathian stories. So
I haven't read this one yet, and I want to read it soon. And so this one comes out, you said September 1st.
September 1st.
But
Yes.
You'll have like art. You'll have like giveaway copies at some point.
I
Right?
would think so. I don't know. I don't have an arc. I have nothing at this point yet.
But we shall negotiate later.
Yes, we will
negotiate later. I think it must have been fun though to bring up somebody who'd been held prisoner for 1,000 years into the present with, you know, the internet and all of the things that.
And all the women are modern. And
yes.
So they're expecting her to be modern. Everyone expects her to know all these things. And she's, I mean, if you've been in a cage, I had rescued a little dog one time that had been in a tiny box. And when I tried to put him out on the floor, he was so frightened just being in a large space. Yeah. And so she was frightened being out of the cage. Like the space was too much for her. And I realized that's how it would be. And I'm like, oh my gosh, she can't do any of these things that all these people are expecting. And she thinks her life mate is going to expect all these things from her. And he's this big bad guy, right? Like, oh my gosh, what have I done? Oh, it was beautiful. It was a beautiful story.
And I can't wait to read that one. I mean, I had a character who, and not too many spoilers here, but I have a character in Say No More who is able to leave Eden and becomes an important part of the book. And when he is faced with, he's only been out of the mainstream for 30 years. So, you know, he everything is different when he comes out, when he gets back to civilization, and, you know, there's billboards everywhere, and it was like that 30 years ago, but not the same. All the cars are different. And the one thing that he recognizes is McDonald's. And he's like, at McDonald's, everything might be different, but McDonald's still has Egg McMuffins for breakfast. So, yeah. So, but I can't even imagine 1,000 years. That would be fun. That would be so much fun.
Yeah. Yeah. It was very cool.
So, Karen, I think you had mentioned possibly reading a little bit from Say No More.
Mm-hmm.
It's that time.
Okay.
And maybe from one of, I think you had mentioned maybe reading from one of Christine's books as well, but let's start with Say More.
I think Christine has her own thing that she's ready to read, right?
Oh, yeah, I've got very small passage if there's time.
Yeah, because mine's like 3 minutes.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Psych myself up here. Okay. So this is, Mercy has arrived in Sacramento, and she's very overwhelmed. I mean, she's on the edge of an anxiety attack. She's gotten to baggage claim, and the friend who's traveling with her says, just go collect yourself. There's a ladies' room over there. Go collect yourself. So that's where she's going. Sacramento, California, Saturday, April 15th, 5:03 p.m. Luckily, the ladies' room was completely unoccupied and quiet. She could think in the quiet. Not that she really wanted to think. She was back in California, back to Gideon, back to Rafe, and back to the memories of Eden that seemed so much closer to the surface here. Eden. As much as she dreaded having to face Gideon and Rafe again, just being in California had her nearly hyperventilating. Eden was here somewhere north of Sacramento, way up in the mountains, where monsters could hide and continue their abuse. Monsters like Ephraim Burton and DJ Belmont. She shuddered. DJ had killed her mother, but it was Ephraim who terrified her to the depths of her soul. He still did. The memory of him, big and hulking, harsh hands that hit, still had the power to reduce her to the traumatized girl she'd been. His one eye, intense and so cruel. His body that had hurt her. Say the word, Mercy. He raped you for an entire year, until she'd nearly died. She would have died had it not been for her mother's sacrifice. But Mama had sacrificed, enabling Mercy's and her brother Gideon's escapes. Gideon had been searching for Eden ever since. He'd become a special agent with the FBI to help people, to find Eden, to free the others who were still enslaved, while I ran away to hide from him, to hide from life, to hide from everything. No more. Everything had changed, all because of Gideon and his passion for the truth. If the FBI found Ephraim, they'd arrest him for murder and sexual assault. The FBI would want her to testify against him. She'd have to see him again, to look at the face that still haunted her nightmares. The angry bees in her gut swarmed. Ephraim Burton was out there, and so was DJ Belmont, walking the earth as free men when her mother was dead. And I've been hiding all this time, afraid of my own shadow. No more. Because she'd returned to do the right thing. I may still be afraid, she muttered quietly, but I'm sure as hell not hiding anymore. She stared at her own reflection. She was pale, and there were dark circles under her eyes. But her eyes were clear, and she straightened her spine, suddenly refilled with purpose. You are not weak. You have survived. She was here in Sacramento to make amends. To Gideon, to Rafe. But if she could make amends and destroy the men who tortured her and her mother and so many others at the same time, that was an empowering thought. You can do this, she said to the woman in the mirror. One step, one breath at a time. I'm back, you sons of bitches. Mercy gave a hard nod to her reflection. She knew what she had to do now. And it wasn't like she'd have to face Ephraim today. The FBI was searching for him, but it wasn't like he was going to pop up and surrender himself. So she had a little while to bolster herself. Gathering her things, she squared her shoulders and walked from the ladies' room, only to come to an abrupt halt, her breath seizing in her lungs. No, it's not possible. It's a dream, a nightmare. It's not real. But then her nightmare smiled, a glass eye glinting as it reflected the overhead lights. Hello, wife. So that's the end of that. That's the end of that scene.
Oh,
That's so good.
so cool.
So Christine?
Okay, mine is very, very short. And this is Pharaoh. It's in his point of view. And he has brought Elizabetta out for the first time. And she is very terrified. And so it's very short. Everyone was eager to meet her, but she couldn't be overwhelmed with too many people. He would have to shield her, although he knew others would misinterpret what he was doing, thinking he was keeping his fragile life mate from them because he was an ancient and held to the old ways. Opinions didn't bother him in the least. He was ancient, and he did hold to the old ways. Farrell also had a strange foreboding. Elizabetta had been given blood by several of the ancients before he had discovered he was her life mate. That had been an accident. He had heard her moaning. That soft little sound of distress had opened an entire new world for him, but it had also triggered his very sensitive alarms. There was danger stalking his woman, and it wasn't coming only from the master vampire. He felt a vague threat to her coming from inside the compound, from someone he trusted, someone who should be protecting her. The threat was so vague, almost as if it wasn't fully formed, but it was enough to put him on alert. Farrell felt a small shudder go through Elisabetta's body, and he wrapped his arm around her tighter, pulling her front to his side. Just look at the beauty surrounding you, Panya Sarna. Tarit Azengard found a place to build his world a long time ago. The others have been securing the land around his compound to add to his fortress. We weave safeguards together to keep everyone protected. She tilted her head up to look at him. No one will ever be safe from Malinov as long as I'm here. I think you know that. Her voice trembled. So she's telling him that they're not safe because she's there, but he knows that she's not safe from someone inside the compound, and only Carpathians are in that compound.
Now we have to read it.
I want.
Oh, that was amazing, both of you. Do you ever consider reading your own books for the audiobook versions?
No. This is not my strong suit. I have a kind of, I've kind of fallen into a monotone, and I don't think that would be pleasing.
Yeah. Well, that would take away from your writing time as well, so that would not be good.
I love my narrators. I think they've done a fabulous job. I sometimes listen to when I, like when I'm knitting or I'm on the treadmill or something, I'll listen to my own audiobooks, and the sex scenes always make me like want to cover my face, even if I'm like alone in the room. But I'm so captivated to have somebody else read me a story that I'll get to the end of a chapter. I'm like, no, keep going. I need to know what happens next, even when it's my story. So I think the narrators do a fabulous job.
That is so true.
I get letters from people about the narrators, so I think they must do a fabulous job. I'm very strange about, even as a child, I didn't like to stand up and read a book. I'm a prolific reader, but in fact, my first job was library, so I could go read all the books in the library.
I wanted to work at the library too.
I did work at the library. I loved working at the library.
Well, that makes me feel good as a librarian.
That was my favorite place when I was a kid. I'd love to go to the library, and I mean, there's so many books, and I kept thinking, well, if I read 5 books this week, how long would it take me to read all of these books?
Yeah, and then when I was a single parent with 4 kids, I mean, heck, I haunted the libraries. That was how I read. That was the only way I could read.
Yep. Yeah. In fact, we have our younger daughter is deaf, and we were. At the time, the educational processes weren't really set up to teach deaf kids to read, because everybody was working off of phonics. Phonics don't work for kids who are deaf. And so we had to come up with our own teaching technique to teach her to read. And we realized that she was already behind her hearing counterparts. And there was this list of books, she was in the 2nd grade, there's a list of books that she had to read for accelerated reading, the kind of that little computer. You read a book and you take a computer test and you get points. And my husband kept that list in his shirt pocket for months and months and months. And he haunted the library, and he was always trying to find the next book on that list. And librarians were so helpful. At the end of that year, Hannah won. She was in the 2nd grade, and she won for the whole school. She beat the 5th graders. So, we credit the library with helping us teach our child to read. I mean, it's always been a really important part of our lives.
Yeah, libraries, got to keep them. We got to keep them.
Yep.
Well, I completely agree with that. Erin said in the chat that there was so much excitement on Facebook after hearing you guys read passages from your books. So obviously, I'm not the only one that loves hearing your voices, your books, your stories in your own voice.
Good.
Hey, that's good.
So we have more questions, but I think, we'll probably end it there just because it's about an hour. And I really, really appreciate all of your time and thoughtfulness and being here with us. And your fans are rabid. Can't wait for your next books and your next stories. So I'm going to turn my video back on so I can thank you face to face.
Hi, Mina.
Hi. I just wanted to say thank you. Your stories are inspiring to so many and keep us, I don't want to say entertained because there's so much more to them, but it's been a tough year, and knowing that we have books that from our favorite authors coming out and available to us probably helps a lot of us get through it. So thank you.
Well, I will tell you, our readers help us get through it. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the whole being in the library, Mina, and inviting us. It's been really, really nice, and I appreciate it so much.
Oh, good. Thank you. Yeah, it's always exciting for me to bring authors of such repute to our readers who, this is a unique opportunity for us to meet and talk with you virtually because we can't go anywhere. So I'm going to say the silver lining to all of this. I got to meet you guys, and so did probably about 150 people.
That's nice.
It is. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful night. Remember, you can still buy Karen and Christine's books from Porter Square Books, signed until the end of the night. And, have a wonderful evening. Happy reading. If you do get Karen's book tonight, I bet you'll be up all night. Not because you're scared, but because you're reading.
I want them to be scared too.
That's a good book.
It is a good
Guys,
time.
you need to be scared too. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for sticking with us for the last hour. We appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you
Good night,
so
everybody.
much. Bye, everybody.
Bye.